Am I the a-hole for telling my daughter her much older boyfriend isn't welcome in our home? My female 48, husband, male 46, and I have a 20-year-old daughter, Ellie, who is currently on vacation from college. About 5 months or so ago, Ellie told us that she had a new boyfriend, who I'll call Tom. This came rather out of the blue as Ellie hadn't mentioned seeing anyone or that she was dating, but both my husband and I were supportive and happy for her. However, Ellie was strangely secretive about the whole situation. Usually, she's an open book, especially with me, and would always share details of her personal life. On this occasion, she wouldn't show any pictures, and we knew next to no information about Tom, other than that they met at a party through a mutual friend. Ellie spent the past month of her vacation in her college town, and the plan was always for her to come back this weekend. Ellie asked if she could bring Tom with her for a few days of the trip as they were getting serious, and she wanted him to meet us. Although we mentioned that we knew barely anything about him, Ellie expressed that it would be a surprise and that we'd love him. Given he's clearly an important part of our daughter's life, we agreed and said we'd look forward to spending the weekend together. Yesterday morning, we went to pick up Ellie and Tom from the airport to drive them to our place, and we were shocked. We knew instantly that Tom was much older than Ellie, and he certainly wasn't a college student. I was just in a state of surprise, but didn't want to cause a scene, and told my husband to do the same. We drove home, but it was a frosty journey, which Ellie commented on. When we arrived, my husband point-blank asked Tom how old he was. Tom said he was 44. I was immediately disgusted. He's only 2 years younger than my husband and old enough to be Ellie's father. My husband continued to interrogate him, asking how they met and the whole background. Ellie explained that it was at a party and Tom was there because he's well known around the town, and they realized they had a lot in common and hit it off from there. I really didn't want to hear any more, and my husband told Tom to leave. Ellie shouted and said how unfair this was, and we hadn't even given Tom a chance, and that he made her happy. Tom could sense the tension, so left, and Ellie followed behind him. I texted Ellie to tell her we'd love to see her and to come over to discuss the situation. She asked if Tom was welcome, and I said he wasn't. Therefore, after labeling me a judgmental a-hole, she told me she wasn't coming and that they would be staying at a local hotel and catching up with friends. I feel terrible about the whole situation and don't want to lose my daughter over it. My husband isn't budging and says he'd have to be held back if he ever saw that man again. Am I the a-hole for saying he isn't welcome, or have I done the right thing? I was incredibly down throughout most of Sunday, so I spoke to my husband and said that I really wanted to see Ellie. However, I knew that wouldn't be possible without also seeing Tom, so I mentioned to my husband about meeting Ellie and Tom at a neutral location for brunch today. I asked my husband if he wanted to join, but he said he didn't feel in the right frame of mind at this stage, so we agreed that I would go alone. I was anxious throughout the drive, but when I met Ellie, those nerves subsided relatively quickly. I was generally just happy to see her and that she was well. I still felt a bit uncomfortable around Tom, but I thought this was the opportunity to find out more about him and his intentions, as it were. We sat down and I tried to find out as much information about Tom as possible. When I asked him to elaborate on being known around a college town and being at the same party as Ellie, Tom said he used to go to the same college when he was Ellie's age, loved the place, and decided to never leave. Throughout his time, he still frequented the main bars and places that college students do, which meant he remained in the community in some form. I found it quite an unsettling response, but remained polite. In terms of other details I learned, Tom has never been married, nor does he have any children. He works as a software engineer and enjoys cooking and meditation in his spare time. Something felt off about him, but maybe I already had my preconceptions. Ellie spoke more about what a good match they were and how much in common they had. When I asked her to elaborate, she spoke about how they both love the same spots around town and campus, with apparently the same love of sushi, and she's never met someone so mature and understanding. Tom also said that Ellie was perfect for him, and he was serious. I probed if he'd had many other relationships with younger women. Ellie didn't enjoy this question, but Tom said that he generally didn't do relationships, yet something about Ellie had drawn him in. Eventually, after about 2 hours, we ended the brunch. Ellie said how nice it had been, and she was so happy I had shown an interest in Tom before asking whether they could both come to dinner some evening. I told her that would be nice, but I would have to speak to her dad. Tom shook my hand, and that was that. My husband remains reluctant, but I feel it's the right thing to do if we want to maintain a relationship with Ellie. I didn't like Tom off first impressions, and this hasn't done much to convince me. Something is just off there, and some of his answers solidified my thoughts about him not being right for Ellie. I suppose I'll have to remain open-minded, but appreciate any thoughts. After I came home from brunch, I spoke to my husband about the possibility of Tom and Ellie joining us for dinner one evening. My husband was completely against it, but I told him that if we still wanted to exercise some degree of control over the situation before we pushed Ellie away entirely, this was something we had to agree to. It took a lot of convincing, but my husband agreed, and we invited Tom and Ellie to come round the Saturday just gone. Before then, I ended up talking to my oldest daughter and Ellie's sister, Holly, 23, about the situation. Holly was shocked, and Ellie had told her nothing. Holly decided to do some social media digging, but struggled because Tom didn't have much of an online presence. She said she was coming to dinner on Saturday. Although I was reluctant because it seemed like it would spiral, I eventually said yes. So, we get to the dinner on Saturday, and Holly just continually grills Tom. It was far, far worse than I did. She asked him if younger girls were his type, why someone his age is still hanging around at college parties, and other small remarks. Ellie told her multiple times to leave her alone, and I tried to act as a mediator. My husband was just silently seething, and I could tell how uncomfortable he felt in Tom's presence. Eventually, Tom and Ellie said they had some big news to share. Ellie announced that she and Tom were planning to move in together for the upcoming college year. I almost spat my drink out. Ellie had planned to live with other friends, and when I questioned this, Tom answered that he realized that he probably won't have another long-term relationship. Ellie makes him so happy. And he doesn't want to waste any time with who I want to be my wife and the future mother of my children. At this point, my husband lost it and told Tom to get out of his house. Tom stood up and seemed affronted, and Ellie started crying. I couldn't remember the last time my husband had shouted like that, and I think it surprised Ellie. Holly said it was deserved and said she needed to get away from the pedo freak. It all ended up with Ellie leaving in tears with Tom, my husband going upstairs, and I was just inconsolable. I've reached out to Ellie since, but she hasn't responded. I don't want her to move in with Tom, and it seems he's trying to derail her whole life. She's 20 and does not need to be married and have kids, especially with someone his age. She's never had a relationship before though, and she appears infatuated to the extent she's not going to listen. My husband has told me that if Ellie marries Tom, that is it, and he wouldn't want a relationship with her going forwards. I can't agree with that and will always love Ellie, but it doesn't mean that the whole situation hasn't made me incredibly sad. 1 year update. So much has happened since then that has been so overwhelming that it caused me to completely forget about this. However, I stumbled upon this Reddit account earlier today, and due to the amount of messages I received, I feel compelled to share an update. I'm still heartbroken and struggling to come to terms with the whole affair. Ellie was so bright, cheery, and with an active social life. Now she lives with Tom in her college town, despite having dropped out of college herself due to the pregnancy, with barely any friends due to most of them distancing themselves from her because of Tom. My husband is also low contact with Ellie and wants nothing to do with Tom, while my daughter Holly also feels the same way and wants nothing to do with Ellie or her baby for as long as she remains with the predator. I still keep in contact with Ellie as much as I can, not only because I love her but also as I know that if things crumble, she'll have no one to turn to. She's ostracized herself, which makes me incredibly sad, and I never thought things would turn out this way. There was a glimmer of hope around March time, where Ellie called me on the phone in tears after discovering that Tom had cheated on her, unsurprisingly, with another college student and an even younger one than Ellie. Although I did try and talk some sense into her and figured this would be a wake-up call, She decided to stay with him after a combination of love bombing and finding out she was pregnant. The wedding has been set for next summer, so the baby can be focused on now. My husband and other daughter have already decided they won't go, and many others on my side of the family are uncomfortable with the idea. I'm trying to stay strong and hope I will love my grandchild, but this isn't something that will ever get easier. If there are any other groundbreaking updates, I will try to share. If not, I appreciate everyone's support and advice. It really meant more than you know.